Okay, okay, that sounds fine. I lost one of my props. We'll have to make one. That will show you how to. Oh yeah, traditional Dr. Pepper box. Luckily, I had one in the back end of my car.
All right. So no, Sio Nigad, thanks for coming. Thank you for being here. I know it's weather's been a little rough today, so thank you all for making it out anyway. We have a great presentation again tonight. We have Noel Grayson again, who was here 2 months ago teaching about bows, and that was very, very interesting. And so we asked him to come back and talk about moccasins, specifically Cherokee style pucker toe moccasins. This subject, I get a lot of requests for this, local, at large. People want to learn how to make their own moccasins. And in November, during Native American Heritage Month, we now have a Rock Your Mocks. Well, it used to be one day, but I think it's turned into a whole week. So maybe y'all can make your own moccasins for that. So that would be good. But I'm going to read a little bit about Noel and then turn it over to him. Noel Grayson is a full-blood Cherokee, and he was born in December of 1966 to Joe Grayson Sr. and Charlotte Robin Grayson, and is number 10 of 11 children. And he has been married to Carrie Grayson for 19 years, and I know Carrie, she's wonderful. And they have two daughters, Riley Noel, Rayleigh Noel, and Lauren Nicole. Noel was recognized as a Cherokee National Treasure in '98 for flint napping and bows, the youngest male ever to be bestowed this honor. He started making bows and arrows as a small child and progressed on to tanning hides that he and his brothers harvested. Noel taught and has demonstrated living history and primitive skills and other lost arts to promote the beauty of the southeastern Indian art. Noel says, "My father showed me how to flint nap when I was only 4 years old. 4 years old. But I didn't start trying to do it till later, using the percussion technique he had shown me. Scott Ratcliffe introduced me to pressure flaking. My father told me how to make a real bow, and I graduated from a stick to real bows." Noel says he was shown shortcuts in brain tanning by a Creek-recognized master, the late Jimmy Sanders. And goes on to say, "I self-studied and taught other skills. I took a pair of moccasins apart and figured the stitch out. My mother tried to show me as a boy, but I wouldn't learn or listen, saying, 'Men don't do that.' My mother was an Indian cultural teacher in the Tahlequah school system, and my father, like all other Indian men of his generation, was a great outdoorsman, having all the primitive skills of our ancestors." I love that. I love how you say that. Noel works as the village lead or the supervisor at the Cherokee Heritage Center now, primarily in our village, ensuring that people get a good glimpse of who we were and are as a people. So, Noel, it's good to have you back. Thank you for being here.
What on, Donnie? Thank you. What do? Well, I don't know if you all seen the flyer, but it says from hide to heel. Okay, now I can just show you how to make a pair of moccasins in just a few minutes. So what I want to actually start with is how to make the leather to make these moccasins, okay? Now I'm actually going to pass a pair of these moccasins around so you get a feel for brain tan leather and the moccasin itself. And I want you to study the stitching in them. Now, to begin with, we are actually a pretty wasteful society, okay? Now, I know you guys hunt. You hunt deer, or you know somebody who does, and what do they do with the hide? They toss it all the time, okay? Now, of course, back in the day, this was a currency for us, okay? We traded everything. But to actually make a brain-tanned hide out of this, get you a deer hide. Now, for me, the easiest way to do this is to use stone tools, because when you nap flint, the way you chip the edge of it leaves little serrations along it, which act like fingernails and help you scrape the meat and the membrane off the hide. Now, of course, today, which is true, historically accurate, they would take gun barrels and smash them down using these as hide scrapers to scrape the hide with also, okay? Now, of course, once you get all the meat and the membrane off of the hide, if you're just going to make a pelt like this, that's far enough, okay? You just take the animal's brain and scramble it like an egg, squish it up, right? The brain actually has oils in it that will soak into the hide, okay? Now, there's fibers in this hide just like thread in cloth, okay? So it gets in there, lubricates all those fibers. You lace this back up in a frame and rub on it with a stick. Any kind of stick will work until it's completely dry. Now I want you to think about this. How long does it take a piece of leather to dry? Right? You're talking 5 or 6 hours. And so you work at that entire time. What's actually happening, because you've lubricated the fibers, you rub on it with a stick, it pulls the fibers apart, softening the hide. Now of course if it gets wet, it turns back into rawhide. It gets stiff again like this, okay? And so what you do is you smoke it. Now there's various ways to do this, okay? I generally will sew the entire thing up like a sock, leaving the bottom open. I'll dig a hole, get hot coals, put them in that hole, get punk wood, rotten wood, okay? And just break it up inside there, and it will start billowing, okay? Smoke out. It will not burn because it's rotten wood, right? Now, with that tube I have, I'll make a tripod, swing it over that hole, and skirt the inside of it, or the outsides around that hole, channeling smoke into it, and it will change the color of the hide itself. The more you smoke it, the darker it gets. But this ensures that if it gets wet, it won't get stiff again. It'll dry soft every single time. And a good example is if you hang a pair of blue jeans on the line. You know how they get a little bit of body to them. They get a little bit stiff, but once you mess with them, they'll soften back up. Deer hide's the same way. It'll do the same thing. But of course, if you want to make leather, what we call Ujaward is how we say this. Now we had a different kind of word for European leather. Okay, Ganuch is what we called it. But Ujaward. Now there's a couple of different ways you can do all these, okay? There's different ways to do all of this. This is just a technique I know and it works, so I constantly use it. I'm going to shave all the meat and the membrane off of this thing. I'll just get either a sharp rock or a piece of metal, sharpen that thing just like a razor, and shave the hair off of it. It's like the shaving that we do nowadays, except you'd be taking the top layer of skin right along with it. It's the epidermis, and you're going to get down to the dermis itself, the true skin. Now, all the rest of it from there is completely the same, okay? Take the brain, scramble it up. You can add a gallon of water to it and soak that hide in it. Let it set overnight. The next day, pull it out. Wring all that excess moisture out of it. A lot of times what I'm doing, because I poke holes in it and lace it in frame, is I'll run a stick through this, have somebody hold on to that, run a stick through the top part, and both of us will sit there and twist it. Me and my wife used to do this quite often, okay? And twist it until it breaks into a knot, starts knotting up. What you're doing is breaking the hide, you're pulling the fibers apart. This makes it a lot easier to tan. But, again, you've got leather, okay? You've got leather, now you're gonna use this for clothing. He's kind of shading a little bit. You can use it for clothing, leggings, shirts, shoes, everything. Now, when you're making these shoes, okay, because we're talking from hide to heel, now you have leather. It's easy to explain. It's a little bit labor intensive to actually do it. Okay, I won't lie to you. There's a little bit of labor involved in it. That chases a lot of our youngsters off when they figure out that you actually have to work that hide to make it soft. One of my own nephews asked me one time, he said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, you scrape all the meat and the membrane off of it." Before I could say anything, he'd say, "And that makes it soft?" I'd say, "No." Then you shave the hair off of it. "Oh, that makes it soft." "No." Then you rub the brain into it, and that makes it. I mean, he wouldn't give me a chance to stop, you know. And so finally I said, "You just rub it till it's dry."
How many hours does it usually take?
Just the rubbing part takes me about 6 hours. Now, once I finish rubbing it dry, now I'm going to tell you my secrets, okay? Once I have it in the frame, and I'm rubbing it after about 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours, depending on weather, you touch it, okay? If it's still wet, it will leave an indentation, like you're poking your finger on a piece of wet clay. Once it's dry, it won't do that. That's how you tell. Once I've got it dry like that, I will tie a rope to a tree, about this far apart and this high, and get that thing and pull it back and forth across it, doing every inch of it, further pulling the fibers apart. And like I said, it's a little bit labor intensive. It's kind of rough on my hands nowadays. Yes, yes. But, okay, another technique. You can just use hardwood ashes, lye, okay? It makes lye. Just get hardwood ashes and mix it with water. Some of you guys know that's how you take the hull off of corn. Same thing, same thing. But soak that hide in it. It'll plump the hide up, releasing creatine and collagens in it, and you can scrape all that stuff out of it. Makes the work easier, but you got to be careful doing that, okay? Because if you let it sit in that water too long, it will start going south on you, and you won't want to touch it, okay? It's going to start stinking bad. You got to remember when you're working stuff like this, even the brain, okay? If you got cuts on your hands, don't do it. Either that or wear gloves, because the entire time you're doing this, that's just a dead animal skin and a dead animal's brain, so it's in a constant state of decay, okay? So you got to be careful when you're doing it. Do it all at one time, okay? Just get it. Now, we all pretty clear on making leather? You ready to go out and tan a hide? It's not that bad, folks, okay? You got to take those precautions, though. You do. Now, I have lost my pattern that I made, but it's easy to do, okay? Now, you can use any brand of pop you want, okay? Dr. Pepper's the best, though. Now, when you're making these patterns, I'm going to show you the Noel Grayson technique. It is simple, okay? It is real simple. Let's see, here we go. The old traditional compass, okay? Most Indians' feet are every bit around circumference as they are long, okay? And mine hold true to that, okay? My feet are just as big as they are around. So, I didn't bring anything to measure with, but we'll use that just for an example. Get you a compass, okay? Measure your foot. Don't lie about it, ladies, okay? Actually use the length of your foot to do this, and it's going to work a lot better. Get your circumference first, okay? All the way around it, around the heel, the highest part right here, okay? Once you've got that, measure it. Let's say mine 10.5. And so I want to make a slid. I want to make a circle like this, okay? Just make your circle. Next, you're going to find the inside. Do we have a straight edge? That box will work. Thank you. We're going to take a straight edge and get us a line. Now, like so, right down the middle of it. Okay, now we're going to cross that line like a crosshair, guys. Just like you're looking down your scope. Try to get that thing as square as you can. Boy, I need an eraser. So make a crosshair like this. Now what I want to do is transfer that distance from, let's step back here, from the center to the side, that distance, all the way down here. Okay? On both sides. So what I'm going to end up with is something that looks like the free throw of a basketball court. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? You know what the free throw line is. That's the only way I could ever make a basket. Now, we just connect the dots. Now, once you make this pattern and once you get one that fits your foot, save it. Take it from center to the edge and just square up, okay? Center to the edge. All you're doing is measuring this part and transferring it down to here on both sides. So, looks like the free throw on a basketball court, right? Now we need to cut that out too. Now me, myself, hold on, I can't see. I'm going to cut half of this out and I'm going to show you another half of it too while I'm doing this before I cut it the rest of the way. We're going to stop right there and we're going to cut straight across the base of it like this. And we're going to extend this one because the reason I use this technique right here is it saves a lot of leather. Okay. Now this was actually one of our techniques that we used making moccasins. Uh-huh. Now, you'll understand why I use this technique here in a second. Yeah. The pattern would be right here along with the other side being here, okay? Now, if you put that on a piece of leather, that takes up a lot of space, okay? That's a lot of space. But if you just use the little piece, cut this off because you can sew this on later, which is something that we did because we would be doing beadwork on it. Or the ladies did. They dressed us up, dressed the men up fine. But there's the pattern to your shoe. You can sew those flaps on later, right? Do some beadwork on them. If that shoe ever wears out, you can take that off and put it on the next pair. You don't have to change anything. Okay, see if I got all my stuff, if I haven't lost everything else too. And I may have lost it, naturally. We'll make one out of this. Now, we're going to trace this one. I know I had all my stuff together. I know I did. But that's me. I lose stuff all the time. Okay, so now all you have to do is lay it out like this. Decide where it's going to fit. Now when you do this with hides, because hides are different thicknesses all around it, use something from the same area, okay? Use up around the neck, right here and right here. A hide is generally thicker around the neck and going right down the base of it, all right, right down the middle of the back. And so use pieces from the same area. That way you get constant thickness on it. Oh no, here we go. Here we go. I did have that piece. Now let me look at this. Okay. Wear shoes the same way the animal wears them. Okay? The meat side to the inside. The fur side to the outside. So you actually have to look at these. Now what you're going to do with this is fold it in half, okay? Like so. You see there's the pattern to it. Now you want to make a mark when you fold these. And I just put my pencil up, hold on. So I'm going to make a mark right here, going up, and a mark back here in the back, so I know where center is. Plus, I want to get the edge like this so that I know where center is on the sides too. We're making that big X again in the middle. That's what that big X is for. Of course, I didn't do this prior to it because I have my own pattern at the house that I use to make my moccasins with. But you're going to mark center. Okay, now we have 4 spots. Now we're ready to start lacing, okay? You can either use sinew, which is what we used a lot, or you can use a piece of brain tanned hide like this. Matter of fact, I'll use this little piece right here. Now I'm just going to cut a strip of this. Just a thin strip because believe me, brain tan hide is really stout, okay? You can see it's just a little thin strip. I will need an assistant. Oops. I will personally make you a pair of moccasins if you can break that. Sound like a good deal? Yes, that one's brain tan. Now, what I'm going to do, I'll go ahead and y'all can pass that around to feel the strength of it. I'm going to cut another strip of it. And the reason I use brain tan to do this, to do these ties like this, because it is that strong. And sometimes when I'm making shoes, I put a lot of stress on this, pulling it. Because when you do this, you put a lot of stress on it. You have to make that pucker, okay? Now all I'm going to do is tie a simple knot in the end of it, okay? Stretch it out. And I will usually work it a little bit. And the end of it, okay? This counts. You chew on it. If you have time, chew it good. Twist it. And let it set and dry like that, okay? It'll stiffen up, makes it easier to sew with. Okay, next, an awl. Use a metal awl, use a bone awl, they're all the same, especially if you use brain tan, because brain tan being made the way it is, it's easy to sew on, it's easy to poke holes in with an awl, everything, because the fibers are all pulled apart, all right? So we're going to start in the very center. I'll turn my back. Can everybody see it? Come in about 1/8 of an inch right here, okay? Poke a hole in it. Take the lace and run it through it. Now from here, it's a whip stitch. You're going to poke a hole in this side and then go to this side, always over and under, all the way up to your marks on the sides here. Now to start with when I'm doing this, because I want mine to curl in, I don't measure anything, okay? I'm always just using my fingers and stuff. You know, when I measure things, that's an inch, right? My thumb's an inch wide. I'll measure stuff like this a lot of times. But when I'm doing this, your fingernails are right there at all times, right? Excellent measuring tool. I'll use my fingernail right here, and I want to go over here and take from one side of my fingernail to the next, go in 1/8 of an inch roughly on the hide, poke a hole in it. Now, we've pulled it through this way. We're going to pull it over and go through that hole. But you got to do it quick. Now, do not think that you're going to use hole punches on this, okay? Because hole punches take a bite out of it. It leaves a hole, just leaves a hole. If you use a awl, that hole go in there, and you'll notice it when you start doing it. You poke a hole in there, and sometimes before you can get that thing in there, that hole will close up. That's what you want. You want it to close up around it and tighten. Okay, from here, we're wanting to go from where we poke this hole, again, the width of your finger. Okay, the width of your fingernail. And so I want to lay this up there and go the width of my fingernail and poke a hole on this side. Now I only do this once, okay? So pay attention. No, I'm joking. But I only use my little finger one time. After that, I'll use my thumb because I'm lazy and I want to spread that out and it makes it faster. But it's a work boot moccasin. We had different kinds of moccasins. What I'm showing you is a work boot moccasin, something you would have used in everyday use. Believe me, the stuff that they bead on was fine, fine stitches, okay? Okay, from here, I'm going to make that pucker. I'm going to push it in. I'm putting a lot of stress on that thing. I'm going to push it in, trade places, right? Roll it over, use my thumb to measure my distance, right here to right here. Again, 1/8 of an inch. And leave it in there before you grab this. That way it won't close up before you can get it in there. Now, the rest of it is just as simple as that. You're going to do the whole thing using your thumb to measure it, and because you got your hands right here, right, you can use your thumb right off the bat, just like this, to measure where the next hole goes. Now, once you get used to doing this, it only takes about 20 minutes per moccasin to do this part. I'm going to show you a back stitch. Did you all notice the back stitch of that moccasin we passed around? The back side of it, okay? That's something else that is a southeastern style Cherokee stitch. Now you see the reason why I chew on that brain tan. It'll stay pointed like a needle. Now you can either flip these inside out or wear them with this big thick pucker on the outside. Me, myself, I like leaving that big thick pucker on the outside. You can wear them either way. We all had personal preference when we did this, okay? Everybody had their own style. Any moccasins I make like this, if I see them anywhere, I know that I have either made them or have shown the person who is making them how to make them. When I first went back to the village about 5 years ago, a good friend of mine, Tommy Wildcat, comes up to me and he says, "Tim, you know how to make those center seam moccasins?" And I said, "Yeah, I know how to make center seam moccasins." He said, "Why don't you make everybody in the village a pair?" I said, no way. I said, "I'll tell you what I will do, though. I'll show everybody how to make them. They can make their own."
I don't come all get.
Yeah. He's a good guy.
Yes, sir, he is.
But I showed 2 people, and I told them, next, you show 2 people. And so pretty soon, the whole village, you know, nobody had to worry about moccasins. If they needed moccasins, all they had to do was make them. They knew how to make them. But it's real easy, okay? And you can see just in a few stitches I've done, I'm starting to get my pucker on the end. Of course, like I said, it takes about 20 minutes to pull this little trick off right here. It's just kind of monotonous. You just have to do it. Does anybody have any questions about anything I'm doing up to this point?
Back,
Okay.
in the, my, in, Eastern Cherokee, I don't know where are you anyway? I'm Cheyenne anyway. I'm Cheyenne, but I'm Cherokee too, but I'm learning how to do this anyway, because, he knows who I am. And, all the taking and teaching, like, that's really good. I mean, but all the stuff they've learned, it's really, what I'm trying to say, boss.
Well, there's just a lot here,
Yeah.
and to learn and then to teach someone else is a gift.
No, I wanna know, what, is Eastern Cherokee and Western Cherokee do the same thing?
Yes. Yes.
Is that where it came from?
In a sense, yes, because that's where we come from.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
You can even look at historical paintings, and there's like, you'll see the shoes. In historical paintings, you'll see the shoes that look like that on the eastern tribes. Because if it's a full body one, their moccasins will have that style.
Trying to shrink up on me. Hold on.
Can
Here we
I
go.
ask another question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Now Choctaws around that area, do they have anything to do with the same, will they teach the same style we do right here?
All the southeastern tribes used this style of moccasin, a center seam. I've actually seen some. I'm kicking myself now for not being able to remember what tribe it was. But it was somebody that was out west, out here already, that was using this style of shoe.
Historical,
Uh-huh.
it really is historical.
What, I'm glad that Noel's here because, we know about Minnetonka moccasins, so moccasins are manufactured, by people. And there are all sorts of ways to make moccasins but this style, as Noel said, is something our people did in the whole southeast, all the different tribes in that area.
Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Seminoles, maybe even. So, and so what we're trying to understand is, what did we do? Because there's so many misconceptions out there about what Cherokees did, how we looked, how we dressed. And so what we try to bring you is something more authentic, I suppose. And so that's why it's great to have Noel here to not only show us how to make something, but the background on it too. So you're asking some really good questions. Appreciate that.
Now, I do want to point this out too. Okay, you remember those two marks we put on there, right? The two from side to side? While you're doing this, keep an eye on those marks so that you don't get it uneven. If it does happen to get just a little bit uneven, take a little bit more on the other side. Take a bigger bite out of it, okay, and even it right back up. Yeah, like a lacing. Now, of course, with this one, it's coming along pretty good. I've got it, maybe about halfway within the few minutes that we've been sitting here talking. So, since I've got it that far right now, I'm going to show you. Imagine your foot being inside of it right here, and you have a moccasin. Okay, again, it's a work boot moccasin. It's done really fast. It's real easy to do. Some people are advocates for turning it inside out. Now that may look more familiar to you, being done this way, with that look, okay? Now you can turn them inside out, or you can just wear them right side out like this, okay?
If you're gonna wear them inside out, you probably have to cut them out of the hide start. With the inside of the hide. Yeah, with the
Yes.
insides to the outside.
Yes.
Okay, like after you got it all like down and nothing, how can you tell the difference? between the side that had the fur and the side that was closest to the meat?
Okay, the side that has the fur on it will be smoother, like felty, like felt. Okay, the side that has the meat on it will have pieces on it like this. Now with this stuff right here, this is actually a commercial tan leather that I'm demonstrating with. So I actually had to look at it real close to see it. Double suede, I think is what they call it, German tan.
Emily reminded me that at Crystal Bridges Museum, we saw a painting of Daniel Boone and Will's wearing this style of
Really?
Yeah, because, you know, one of the slides was Cherokee, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It wasn't a watch, you know.
a lot of Europeans took up our way of dress just as fast as we took up theirs. Yeah, they are. When you make them right, using this technique right here, they should fit like a sock. I know some of you wore moccasins and they're just a little bit loose. When you use this technique, because brain tan, like this one right here, borrow this for a second, brain tan like this has stretch to it. See how that works? All the fibers in this one are still mobile, okay? They're still moving.
And if you do it with chemicals, you won't get that?
No, not really. Yeah, if you use a chemical tan hide, pull it and stretch on it as best you can, okay? Because the bad thing about chemical tan is they use chemicals to do it. Okay, now let's say there's the third shift, the night shift. I'm not saying nobody bad about anybody who works the night shift, but you know, maybe they step outside and go smoke a cigarette, you know, or something, go to the break room, and instead of letting that hide soak for, say 15, 20 minutes, however long they do it, they accidentally let it soak for about 35 minutes and they make up for it in the rinse or something. Instead of getting all the chemicals washed out of it, they stay in there. So if it gets wet, it activates that chemical again.
Yeah.
And one of the guys at work found this out today. He washed his leggings, and then one of his straps came off. Asked my wife to fix it. She said, sure. She sewed it up. I walked in there and she said, I don't think it's going to take. I used my fingernail on his leggings and grabbed a hold of that leather and pulled the piece off of it. But what it does when it gets wet, it activates the chemical again. And that's not all of them. Sometimes you get good hides. Sometimes you don't. But brain tan, you cannot go wrong with it. Okay? It's a good stout hide. You seen that little lace I passed around?
They didn't pass it any further. It's over there somewhere.
Okay. Offer still stands. If you can break it, I'll make you a pair. Brain tan at that.
Coffee.
Is there a difference in the type of skin you use, like deer, buffalo?
Well, buffalo and stuff naturally being thicker, but you can make it just as soft. Okay. I've seen groundhogs. Okay, groundhog moccasins like this. And even though I have a couple of groundhogs, I don't know if I'm going to make moccasins out of them. I'll save them for bowstrings.
Can I ask another question?
Uh-huh.
Reptile, you use reptile skin?
Not generally myself, not to make shoes out of, or although they did use a snake skin, like rattlesnake skin, for a belt. And I've heard of it, I've read about it, I've never researched it. But I do know they used a rattlesnake skin for a belt.
When I asked what I did, my moccasins are made out of buffalo. But every time I wear them, they stretch out more.
Your moccasins are made out of buffalo, and every time you wear them, they stretch out more.
They won't stay on.
Are they commercial?
I guess, I don't know about, about the skin from Light Eye.
It might be commercial tan, and when you get that commercial tan leather like that, if you're going to make anything out of it, pre-stretch it. sit there and stretch it as much as you can. Like if you make leggings or shoes, stretch it. You know, get all the stretch out of it you can, so you don't actually make something out of it and have it stretch out of shape.
I think she said she did.
May not have just stretched it enough. It's hard to say.
I tried to wear them, but slide off.
How long did you say you left added a gallon of water to the brains, and how long did you say you put it in there?
Overnight. Yeah. I started doing that back when I first started brain tanning. That way it gave me all day the next day to work it.
The next day, then you scrape the meat off.
No, I scrape all the meat and the membrane off of it prior to doing that.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So that's the first step after you get the hide off?
The first step, soon as you get a hide, scrape the meat and the membrane off of it. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. Personally, myself, I lace it up in a frame. Now, when you lace these hides up, I'm glad you brought that up. If you look at these hides, you see that? Hands width apart. Okay? That's a good way to judge it. It's just grab it, poke a hole here, poke a hole there. Lace it up in the frame. Once you have it laced up in the frame, you can either use a stone tool or a metal tool, anything, and scrape all of that meat and that membrane off of it.
After you get that, then you soak it overnight,
I let mine dry out.
dry out.
Yeah, I'm going to let mine dry out. Depends on weather, okay? Because a lot of times when I'm doing this, I shave the hair as opposed to putting it in a lye solution. It's just faster to me. I'll shave all the hair off of it. Like I said, it's like shaving the top layer of skin right along with it. You have to get past the hair and the epidermis and get to the dermis. Yes, do the inside first. Once you do that inside too, like this. Once you do the inside, let it dry out. It's rawhide. It's good indefinitely. Just keep it dry. Okay? So you can use it anytime now. Just let it sit back. Yeah. Then when I'm ready for it, I'll actually dampen it a little bit, lace it up in the frame, let it pull itself tight. Don't go through there and think you got to pull it tight as a drum. Okay? When it dries, it will tighten itself up. And then start at the top and start shaving it all the way down.
Do you follow the way the hair is laying, or do you go against
You go with the hair. Okay, go with the hair, just pulling it all off. Be careful of the sides. They're thin. Right down the middle, you might shave that a little bit more and shave some of that skin off of it and thin that spot out because it's going to be thick. All animals are thick up around the neck and down the backbone.
So you just need a frame just about equal to the size, a little bit bigger than your hide, and then you tie it.
I usually go with about 4 foot by 5 foot, and that's generally big enough to handle any deer around here. Now, if you get some of them mule deers, you might need a little bigger.
What about elk?
Elk, oh, elk's pretty good size. Elk is good size. And the weight of an elk and buffalo and stuff like that, now, elk ain't so bad. Buffalo, to me, I've done a buffalo, and I really don't care to do them. It's just too much work. I'm pretty lazy by nature. But the meat is hard to get off.
No, on your frames,
Yes.
what type of, do you use a wooden frame, or do you use, some people have went to the bed frame, metal?
I have both. Okay, for the village, at Dilligwa, I'll be using a wood frame. Okay, but for my own personal use, I have a sucker rod frame that I can use. Now, I'm glad you brought that up too, because when you pull these up and you tighten them up on that frame, if you get them too tight, now I'm using sucker rod that's about 1 inch thick. I've actually put a hide in it before while it was wet, and when it dried, the edges of it were sucked in like this, on the top of them. And that's a little too tight.
Have you studied, during the fur trade, the deer and
how much was sent over back to Europe? Because as far as I can tell, they're just the deer populations back east were just nearly wiped out. They've had to reintroduce.
Yes, they were within.
Yeah.
I think it was in 1757, 1756, about 236,000 went through one trading post.
Oh my goodness.
Now, we actually almost decimated the deer population in the southeast through a deer fur trade like this with the Europeans. About 256,000. I think it was actually in 1756. And it's 256,000 and some change, like 336 or something like that.
And somebody be having to clean all that too, I mean, wow.
The women.
Oh,
The women were doing this. Being a matrilineal society, anything that comes into the household belongs to the women. The house is everything.
At that time, yeah, at that time it was.
A great
At my
point.
house, it still is.
so with that, you have to have a bunch of friends around the house and just constantly working on this.
Well, for a long time, what I've studied is the women would go hunting right along with us on hunting camps. We'd go hunt 2 or 3 weeks out of the year, and we'd have enough deer, meat, bones, hides to sustain us the rest of the year. And so you could work on them any time you wanted to, because once you turn them into rawhides, they're good indefinitely. Okay.
Did they dry the meat out to preserve it, like jerky or how did they do that?
They would either dry it, smoke it, or salt it. Now, the women are the ones who do this, and so they can preserve it any way they want to. They're going to be the ones who cook it. Okay, it's theirs.
Yeah. So this would be like nothing different, it's still same kind of deer work.
We followed up with.
Like the Camden keeps operating and then the missile hunt, and then we keep cooking and working on preserving it.
Uh-huh. Now, that was prior to European contact. After European contact, the women actually quit going hunting with us that long, because after European contact, we're trying to garnish as many hides as we can possibly get. And so we go out all winter. Okay.
It's probably a little bit more dangerous with Europeans hunting you down too.
Yeah. And you think about it, because during this time, they're introducing us into a lot of things, okay, a lot of European goods. Within 100 years, we decimated the deer population and almost became completely dependent on European goods. But they also introduced us into something we had never heard of before. Credit. No joke.
He said credit.
And that was one of our downfalls too.
Is the hide from a buck tougher than a doe's hide?
Yes, it is. Now, I myself, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's just my way of thinking. And I think that a hide where the animal has suffered, bad shot, had to suffer while it died, it seems like it has a tougher hide to tan. And it may not be, but it just seems that way.
Tim, got a question.
Uh-huh.
The movie, Last Mohicans, is that really true about what happened? Pretty much, around Cherokee, more or less, really wasn't about the last Mohican one.
I don't know, I've never seen that movie all the way through.
I think, in my first opinion, that was really more or less about what the Cherokee was. It was not, the Mohicans really had nothing to do with that area. Not the Appalachians, no.
I'm not sure about that, Rob. I'm not sure about that one. Okay.
I'm told they did a lot of good research for that movie, the history, the clothing and all that kind of.
Yeah.
I hope so.
I think it's a trade Cherokee.
Yeah.
One of these days I'm going to watch that movie. There's a lot of movies out there that I've never actually watched, though. Okay, now we have our moccasin. kind of got lost on that, but I ended up pretty close. And this is what I'm talking about. Matching it up right here, and you see the back end is just a little bit longer than the front end. So I'm going to take that much. I'm going to do one more stitch and try to pull that section in. There we go. They're even. Now for tying it off, okay, there's different ways you can tie this off. There's as many ways to make these moccasins and as many ways to finish them as there is people who make them. I pulled it out again.
Cherokee women that introduced us to the term tan your hide.
Might have been.
Apparently that was with a belt.
Now all I've done is pull this one through, okay, doing my last stitch. With my last stitch, before I pull it tight, I place this in it and make a simple knot out of it, and that's enough to actually hold it, okay? And so now we have, let's do it like this. This inner seam moccasin. Okay. Now, really, it was kind of monotonous to do it, you know, just going back and forth doing the whip stitch. But there you have it, folks. Or you can wear it inside out. It's all personal preference. Now comes the good part, folks. Finishing it. Again, we're going to find center right there. Now, I have actually seen needles, bone needles, okay? I've actually seen bone needles. There's different styles of needles you can use. If you're just sewing leather, a good S-hook needle like these, excellent for sewing leather because it gives you something to hold on to and you can generate some force and push it through just about any thickness. But what I want to use is a Glover's needle. Now I do not remember the size, I'm sorry about that, but I think it's about an 8, if I remember right. Glover's needle actually has a square end on it. Let's see, yeah, we'll use that one. Now, of course they were using sinew to do this with, but somewhere, hopefully I got it, there we go. It's not actually artificial sinew, in a sense it is, but it's not. It's actually used to sew up shoes and make boots and stuff. My wife used to get mad at me because if my boots tore up, I'd sew them back together and fix them. She'd say, quit doing that. This I bought at a leather store, and I don't actually remember what the name of it is, but it's excellent for doing this. But it's almost like an artificial sinew. I'm not that crazy about using artificial sinew. I mean, I know everybody does, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but I never was crazy about using it. But this will break down just like it. There we go. And let's go ahead and go with a thick piece. Instead of doubling it down, we'll leave it doubled up like this. Ooh, come on now. Does anybody have good eyes? There we go. My mom used to have me do that for her all the time. She says, Timmy on, Noel. Thread this needle for me. Okay, now, once you get it threaded, okay, simple knot in the bottom. Now, I usually do it about 2 or 3 times because depending on the size of the needle I'm using.
Pull out.
Yes, so it doesn't pull out. Got that little bit of excess off right there. Now I'm going to use a big piece to show you how this is done, because it being a small piece of leather, you really can't see it because the stitch I'm going to do on the back of this is relatively small. But I'm going to find center. I'm going to fold this over right here and sew through it. Next, I'm going to fold this one over and sew through it. Southeastern moccasins, Cherokee moccasins in particular, are known for having an inverted T on the bottom of them, or a Y, okay? Now, I know we passed them around, but it goes a long ways. We'll pass them around again, and you can see what I am talking about. This, and you can see the Y. It's really pronounced on the outside. See how that's done? Now I'm going to show you how to do that Y like that, okay? Like this, you can pass that around if you don't mind. I'm going to show you how to do that Y because that is typical of Cherokee and other southeastern Indians making that Y. I'm going to find center like this, but, okay, this, when you get ready to do this, whatever side you're going to have facing out, you want to do inside. Do the stitch on the inside. So that way when you turn it out, it does make that Y like that. Now when I learned how to make these, I had actually bought a pair off of Jimmy Sanders, who was a creek man, he was a brain tanner, who knew how to make these shoes, but I believe that the pair of shoes I bought were made by a good friend of mine. He's a good friend of mine now, named Perry Bowlegs. I believe he's the one who made those shoes. Now I'm going to fold it over like this, okay? Starting in the center, from the very center, I'm just going to make a little fold on the end of it, about that big, maybe a 3/16 of an inch.
Are you folding the middle of it in?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, now I found center like this, okay? And so what I'm doing,
Push it in.
yes,
Like a little pleat in it almost?
yes, I'm folding it like this. This is exaggerated,
Right.
okay? Then once I sew straight through that, I will sew this one on top of it. Equal distance in between, naturally.
Got it now. I was a little confused.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a little bit.
But like I said, I was doing a lot of living history. When that pair of moccasins wore out, I needed a new pair, and not knowing anybody who knew how to make that style of moccasin, my mother being passed away already, I took that pair of moccasins apart and just studied it. But believe me, it wasn't easy. I was nervous about doing it. I was like, oh no, I can't tear it up. And so what I actually did is I took the front pleat out, okay? I took it out. I took 2 or 3 stitches out and stitched it back up. And then next time I went 6 stitches and stitched it back up. And I kept doing that in increments of like 3 and 4 stitches. So by the time I got to the very end of it, it was burned into my brain how to stitch them up. But when it comes to doing stuff like this, I teach myself a lot of stuff like this. Like brain tanning. I was tanning hides. Me and my brother were tanning hides, trying to, back when we was kids. And the late Jimmy Sanders caught me one day. And he seen my hides. I was just using my hides for, like, you know, pieces of leather to nap stone on and stuff. And he seen them and he said, that's not bad. That's not bad. If you really want to learn how to do it, come and see me. And so I did. And it was by leaps and bounds. He showed me stuff that I'd missed completely. Now he is excellent. He was excellent at doing this. He was a master brain tanner recognized by the state. Now, once I've made this little piece, y'all seen the back end of those shoes, right? Once you make that piece, then it's the same thing over again, okay? The same stitch as the front, just a finer stitch, okay? You're not actually going the width of your thumb. You're only going maybe 1/8 of an inch at the most. Whip this side. Now, getting started is kind of rough, I won't lie to you. Getting that stitch to hold in there where you want it is kind of rough.
Is this better though than that kind where you have to put that part in, you know?
Well, as with everything, there was as many stitches and ways of making these moccasins. It was all personal preference, you know, the women were doing it, you know, and you married ladies, how many times have you bought your man a shirt? Right? Because you know what he looks good in, right? The women back then were dressing us men up, making us look fine, taking good care of us. My wife used to tease me and said, "Boy, I used to hate that ugly pair of shorts you wore." But it was my favorite pair. I wore them everywhere. And this is the hard part. Getting it to stay where I put it. You know, a lot of old moccasins like this, they didn't actually last a long time. There is something about sweat that we secrete that messes with sinew, makes it rot faster. And I've told myself too, the next pair of brain tan moccasins I make, I'm going to use sinew on them. Sew it all the way. Maybe even use a bone needle to do this part. Usually I just use an awl and a metal needle. But the bone needles that the women had back then, they would use bone, they used fish bones, things of that nature. Now I told you before that I've seen those needles. Exactly the same size as these. The only difference being the eye was a little bit bigger. There were some fine, fine needles going around back then.
I know this is probably a whole other class, but making sinew red, how difficult is that?
That's easy. That's an easy one. That's easy. Okay, back straps are the best. Okay, you guys who hunt, you know, you get that pretty white strip of sinew going down both sides of the backbone. You know, you really don't have to cut those back straps off. You can just stick your fingers in between that meat and that bone and just run your fingers up and down them, and you can pull that meat off. When you cut that sinew off of it, just kind of slice it off like you're filleting fish, and it's going to have a little bit of meat on it. And so what you do, lay your blade at a 90-degree angle to that sinew and just pull it apart. Right? And it's going to pull all that meat and that membrane off of it. You take that sinew and just put it somewhere. Let it dry out. When you need it, tease it, mess with it. And the fibers are just break apart. Okay. You have to pound that up. I prefer back sinew. Because it's real simple to do. Now, of course, leg sinew is different. Now, you actually have to work leg sinew because it's easy in nature. That's just me.
That's why you're making your own canoe, right?
Uh-huh.
Because you're lazy.
Yeah. That took me, getting it as far as right here. Now you see what I'm using? This adds 5 weeks. Now I did use a chainsaw on it because when we made canoes like that, what we were doing was cutting down the log using fire, packing mud and clay up about, say a foot to 18 inches. Pack mud and clay starting at a foot to 18 inches, as high as you can reach. Starting a fire at the base of it and then just chopping away the charred wood. Letting the fire do the work. Once you have it on the ground, burn the end of it off. Once it's on the ground, as it starts getting deep, we don't want to mess with the sides of it. And so we packed mud and clay along the sides of it so it wouldn't burn. And we fires along the top of it, letting that fire burn into the wood, pushing it down. Canoes being anywhere from 15 to 30 and 35 foot long. Roughly, it takes us about a month to make one of the big ones. Every man in the village worked on those canoes because every man in the village is going to use it. It's communal. It's like the gardens. We share everything in the village.
Probably not made out of hickory, is it?
No, it was made out of yellow pine, poplar, and cottonwood for us. But different tribes, you know, have different things. And people always ask me, what did you use traditionally to do stuff like that? And I tell them, traditionally, we use what's in the area, right? What's handy, what's local. That's traditional. That's what we would use to make things. What's handy, what's local. We use river cane for a lot of stuff because there was a lot of it. William Bartram talks about that too. William Bartram was a Quaker botanist who was paid by the king to come and study plants in the New World. One of the things he writes about is river cane, right? 3 inches in diameter, so it's every bit as big as bamboo. If I'm not mistaken, Grant Foreman, when he writes about 3 rivers over here by Muskogee, said that the river cane is so thick that you can't walk through it. And it's 3 miles wide on each side of the river. Now, I've only come across a couple of cane breaks that I couldn't walk through. Yeah.
They have a small stand there at the Cotulla Mound, near the Cotulla Mound of that old style giant cane.
Really?
Yeah, it's very nice.
You almost don't see that stuff anymore. I'd have actually, myself, said it was extinct because you just don't see it. But that's a big piece of cane. Personally, myself, the biggest piece of cane I ever found, and it actually was river cane, it wasn't bamboo, was about that big. I've got a picture on my phone, and I held a nickel up to it like that.
Yeah.
And that cane is huge. But you know, we utilize cane a lot. We do. We utilize cane for a lot of things ourselves, even by today's standards. Not as much as we used to, but we still use it a lot. And I will assume that if you don't cut cane down, it will get bigger. Because, just from my own experience as a child growing up, my father got a yellow delicious apple tree. Now, we had other apple trees, but he got a yellow delicious. I love yellow delicious apples, right? You know, that's my favorite apple. I was out there looking at it, and my father come out there and he told me, he said, do not mess with that tree. He said, don't pick those apples. He said, you let those apples for 2 years get as big as they can possibly get and fall to the ground. Because if you pick them while they're still small, it trains that tree to grow apples that big. And I do believe that that's the same way with river cane, that if we go out there and pick it when it's this big, it's going to train all that cane around it to just get that big.
100% way, Tim.
Ain't it? It's buddies of mine one time there, you know, and a lot of people were saying, boy, I want to go know where you go get cane at. I thought, oh, it's so close, you can just drive right up to it. Not, you know, them not thinking that I'm using a metaphor. We use the rivers as highways. You can drive right up to it if you're in a boat.
Tim, you doing backflips on the,
Excuse me?
are you doing backflips on the?
Yes. It too it's a fine stitch, and it's the same stitch I used on the front. I'm just going from one side to the next and pulling it tight like this, so that when you put this on, it makes the inverted T in the back right here that we seen earlier, okay? And when you put this on, made like this, they will fit like a sock, okay? they will fit like a sock, or should. Now I say that, but then when I make moccasins, I'm generally making them for myself, yeah. And so I know my foot and I know my pattern.
I know you better, yeah.
And what I actually did to get fairly decent at making these was making shoes for my daughters. Little kids' feet. Now, when you start doing this, little kids' feet are different, folks. You'll have to mess with them a little bit. Yeah.
Now they're telling the young mothers not to put their kids in hard shoes. They put their kids in like these, they look like moccasins, but they're commercial, these little soft shoes, because something about the way the clipper goes.
Really?
Like your children under one should be in hard shoes.
Well, you know, they used to tell me that what I heard when I was growing up is that Indians didn't have feet, they had hooves. Because their feet are just as big around as they are long. You don't have feet, you have hooves. Now, I'm just about finished doing this one right here. It's almost to the top. Now, I'll actually finish this out by going to the top. I'm going to jump ahead of myself here, folks, because this is getting monotonous. I don't mind doing it, but I feel like I'm actually just sitting here spinning my tires in front of you. But there is the shoe. Wow. Okay? Now, another thing, if you noticed on my other shoes, I always fold them in right here. Like that. If you look at that one pair of moccasins I had passing them around, I always fold this. Oh yeah. I always fold the back on it right here. I fold it down so that it folds like this and makes a diamond. Y'all see how that works? And that keeps your shoes straight. Okay, when you take your shoes off, instead of just kicking them off, fold them back down. And then keep your feet right. Now for these, okay, for these, having those cuffs not on them, I'm going to jump ahead of myself. You can either sew leather on it, you can sew wool on it, you can sew anything on it. We were using silk ribbon around them, doing beadwork on them. The beadwork that was done on these was a finer stitch than this, okay? And to get that fine stitch like that, a lot of work went into it, okay? You've seen how long it took me to make this, and this is a work boot moccasin. You can imagine the time that women were putting to make a fine stitch in them. And to make that fine stitch, you just don't go with your thumb like I did for these, just make a fine stitch going back and forth.
That just covers this flap that's out, that you have there, it just covers that?
Yes.
Put it right on top of it?
Uh-huh. If you look at a lot of them old southeastern pictures, the shoes were like that. You would see their foot, and their foot being inside of it, and the flap that went around it. Now, of course, that's personal preference too. Some people like a big flap. Some people like a short flap. Some people had that flap going up like this, and it was half moon, like a cuff. Now, I wish I had actually been able to bring a computer and show you pictures of southeastern moccasins. Believe me, they are fine. All the stitch work that went on top of the ones that were beaded on top right here, believe me, it was a fine, fine stitch. It was a center seam moccasin, and it was fine.
Well, it was fine on this. This one right here, it looks as if you put it on the machine and done a zigzag. It's just as even and fine as it could be.
Well, you have to remember that southeastern women back then were doing this constantly, you know, from the time they're small. Just like kids we have nowadays, you know, our kids, you know, they play with us. My oldest daughter, Ray Lee, one of my favorite pictures is of my daughter rubbing on a deer hide when she's about 3.5 years old. I've got her, she's rubbing on that deer hide, and then she's turned around. In one picture, she's turned around. She's got the biggest smile on her face. That is one of my favorite pictures of her. Now, of course, you know, she tanned those hides, helped me tan hides when she was little. course, she's a teenager now. She don't do it too much. But she still knows how. Still knows how to make arrowheads. She's got a bow, naturally, you know. Remember this pattern I pulled out earlier? Took a wild guess at my own foot. Pretty close, ain't it? May have missed it, I won't lie. I may have missed it by ½ inch, maybe at the most, right? But I know my own foot. So any more questions about what we have? Y'all get the gist of it? I know it's kind of slow, but you know.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Oh, yeah, it's beautiful.
What on? What on?
It's a great lesson, and maybe I'd love to have a hands-on class someday, maybe.
Uh-huh. The key is having enough tools.
Okay.
That's the key, having enough tools. Master mechanic.
Hands up for 10.
You
Hands up for 10.
can
Oh, is that
you can
like
get it
a-
at Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, I was just gonna
Okay,
say,
anything like that. You can just take a nail and sharpen it, you know.
Yeah.
I use the one for opening beads, and it's just like that. You can get them at Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
Go over one more time, all these steps. Now, the first step is I have shave the hair or put it in the frame.
Put it in the frame.
Frame is first,
Yeah.
and then you shave the hair,
Just let it. No, you put it in the frame and scrape the meat off of it.
scrape the meat off. Okay, that's second.
Uh-huh.
And third is,
You shave the hair off of it.
okay, I had those in the wrong order.
Okay. Yeah. I'm kind of scatterbrained when I talk.
Okay. And the frame is about 4 by 5 on all 4 sides.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No. 4 foot by 5 foot. Now that will handle just about any deer we knock down around this area. Ain't it?
Sounds like you're going to go do this. That's great.
I'm gonna give it a try, ain't it?
Hope so. Yeah.
Just one kill a deer.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Most
That's right.
people do.
Yeah, because we are wasteful. You know, a lot of people take that hide and just toss it during hunting season. I live on a dirt road, and I find them all up and down that road.
All right, I think we need to go ahead and wrap up. But thank you so much. No, you taught us not just 1 or 2 lessons, but many tonight. You know, even just how to sew and how to make the leather, the moccasin, and sinew. I mean, that's a lot of lessons tonight. We really appreciate that. And thank you for coming back and just.
Sure thing.
We want to give you a little gift from Community and Cultural Outreach.
Hey, what
Little
on?
bag, T-shirt, and there's some goodies in there.
That's
so
better than my Walmart sack. Next time I come, I'll be having this.
You can put some of your tools in there. So.
Yes, I'm going to.
So, thank you so much. Yes. So, thank you for being here again. Thank you.
Sure
You're
thing.
a wonderful presenter.
What on? What on? Thank you. What on? I sure appreciate y'all listening to me. If you want to try it, if you have any questions, Dilligwa, the ancient village at the Cherokee Heritage Center. I'm there all the time.
That's where you'll find it.
Yes. Saturday of the month. If you're a Cherokee citizen, have your card, you get in free.